So today's knife that I'm reviewing is not a knife that I personally own. This has been lended to me in exchange for some small modifications. And so I can't give an in-depth sort of viewpoint in terms of ownership and fine details. I've messed with it, carried it a little bit, tried to get an impression of it. So keep in mind that the points I'm making in this video, their foundation is based upon that sort of level of experience with this blade. So this is the Dragotac folder by Bastinelli, and I've been following Bastinelli for a long time. I had met him at the USN show, carried some of his knives, specifically his fixed blades, and I even had the chance to sell his BBR1. And ever since he's been making knives, I do enjoy his channel. It has a very cool style to it, and he has this specific sort of blade, I would say, profile or setup. This sort of design that he likes to stick to. This blade is low slung, I guess you would call it. It's set very low in relation to the handle, so your hand always can clear whatever you're cutting. And all of his knives have this, a sort of like, there's no chance of your hand running at the blade because you're running into like the wall, the back of the knife practically. I would say it's a positive effect in terms of utility. In my opinion, a little bit of a negative effect in terms of fighting. Whether it be a combination of this is his rendition, his take on the best fighting knife possible or utility blades, or it's his personal preference on where he wants the blade situated in hand. Those kind of things, I think they differ from person to person. The concept here is he took his Dragotac and made it larger. Not an uncommon idea. Strider has the SMF XL. People love larger blades. Cold Steel has decided to even do it with some of their series. There's always going to be that market for that. I'm actually one of those people where we don't care about gas mileage. We want that V8 or V12, And the same thing, when it comes to something like a knife, depending on how much value you place upon it and how much you're depending upon it, if it is part of your system of self-defense, then you don't want to sacrifice any performance. Especially if, for example, a cutting tool, if say you were in some kind of field that required that constantly, you don't want to have any compromises. You would generally think by increasing the size of something, you're going to increase the capabilities. And that's the question here. Does increasing the size of this make this knife more of a capable fighting knife or a better utility and kitchen knife? And to one of those questions, I'm not completely sure. If we look at the philosophy of what outdoorsmen use, survivalists, Pathfinder, Dave Canterbury, Cody Lundeen, and a lot of bushcrafters, they would have one knife that's their sort of pairing knife, something that's compact, wood whittling. You can still split branches, you can still do a wide variety of utility tasks. Like basically, it's the one thing, jack of all trades knife, but it's small. And then you would carry something that's heavy. Specifically because you need that weight, the size of it, the reach. Rather than expending a lot of energy, using a small knife, you can do things faster. The weight of the knife, like the machete or the axe, will do more of the cutting and less of your muscles having to compensate for that. So the construction of this knife is where I start to find, I guess you would say, little pockets in terms of logic. We start to look at the blade grind. So it's a Wharncliffe, and I love Wharncliffes. The blade shape, you get a little bit of belly, so you can access more of the blade if you have to tilt it. So you can do a little bit more belly cuts rather than just fine tip slashing, pull cuts. But Wharncliffes make the most sense on something compact. And I say that because when you have a small knife, it just makes more sense. If you only have 2 inches of blade, then why do you need nonsense going on? Because whatever you're cutting, you're using all 2 inches probably. A Spyderco Carahawk has a small blade, but it's a very specific type of blade grind. But you can see here, even then, it's just one blade grind. But as you get towards larger knives, that's when you can start doing more because you have more blade length to work with. This is just a normal SMF, but now you can still have your 2 inches of normal cutting edge, something simple like a normal knife. But then you can do something interesting for the tip, give it maybe another level of performance. With the Strider, it's a Tonto tip. With the Hinder, again, it's the same thing. If this was a compact knife and you were to shrink it all down, you'd end up with a stubby little piercing weapon that wouldn't pierce anything because it's not long enough. So it's not logical. But in a larger format, as a bigger knife, you know what? You got your original, how you say, goal accomplished, and now you can add an additional level of, how you say, use and function to the blade. So on the big Dragotac, it's sort of like this was already working as a more compact knife. This blade shape made sense. But the moment you increase the size, you should also do something new in terms of performance, because now you have this extra blade length, a lot of extra blade length to mess with. Why not give it an additional level of abilities or capabilities? It doesn't have that. So a prime comparison of that is if we look at tip strength. Blade stock is 5 millimeters thick, which is sort of a standard, so it's not more exceptionally strong than even a normal sized 4-inch blade knife. So that's kind of funny. If you have here, you have these two. This one's blade is just as strong as this one. In some cases, some of these steels are better than this D2, so it's actually a little bit stronger. But now let's get on to the tip, which is even more important to consider, is that you have basically the fine tip of a paramilitary 2. So though the knife is huge, the tip strength is equal to a paramilitary 2. And you can kind of see the same logic continues. You know, big knife, why not have bigger hardware, more overbuilt hardware, right? Body screws on the strider, we already know how durable those are. You know, small knife like maybe a Carahawk, small screws, not intended for anything large, heavy tasks, because this is just a self-defense knife. It's only meant to cut soft materials. But now you have, again, the Dragotac. So it got bigger, but then the screws are still these compact, small screws. They're no bigger than the Carahawks, and look at the difference of the two knives. In terms of the finish of the knife, I think the finish is outstanding. Lying still at this point, I would say looking at this knife, looking at the quality of materials, knowing that the individual has carried it a lot, and you can see where the G10 has kind of lost its bevels right here as he's been carrying it and it's been rubbing. Overall though, the fit and finish is outstanding. I mean, at this point, I'm going to say this, and I think I can safely say this, that the quality of craftsmanship in terms of finishing work, I mean, you still see it's machine, mostly machine cut, you know, there's wire jet cutting, sure, but when it comes to that finishing work, it's superior than I think Spyderco at this point. I think a Spyderco is more simplistic, and even on some of the Japanese ones, the China ones, you know, the level of, how do I say, unfinished surfaces, you're not going to find that on the line steels or this knife specifically. It is finished all the way to the very end. Every single surface, every single minute detail has been covered just as if it was a custom knife. So you can see where the lock bar is situated, and all the time when I close it like this, it pinches my thumb. I get a little bit of grease on my finger, see the pinch. It is annoying. I will be honest, it bothers me every time, and it's going to always bother me. If this was like one of those Spydercos with the compression lock, you could do more, you could, you know, relief more and cut into this area more, but since this is a frame lock, yeah, that's what you kind of have to get. You have to get some space between the pivot and the lock bar so it's secure. You can hear it. There's a stick. The stop pin is still stainless steel because it's connecting to the magnet. Something is allowing that sudden jolt to make the lock bar engage further. So you have to be realistic here. If you constantly use it in hard cutting tasks where a lot of pressure is being applied on the blade, you're going to end up wearing the lock bar. So it's not, I would say, as tough built. I mean, we've seen other folding knives suffer the same problem. The Strider, to some degree, hinder, a little bit more resistant. You know, the Warren Thomas folders, you know, too much flex because of the titanium and the minimal hardware. But that's something to consider. Again, if you're looking at a big knife and you're thinking, hey, this can handle more serious cutting tasks, it'll wear your knife pretty fast because the construction, the engineering of it is still not capable of supporting that force. Whether the lock issue is just this knife, I don't think it is, because the geometry, it has an aggressive radius, a curvature, and that's great for preventing failsafe, like making a failsafe. It's basically like a Terzula liner lock. The liner lock would sit inside the curvature. The problem with this type of frame lock is the curvature actually bites down into the lock bar. And so you get this sort of where that happens too quickly. Sort of like the old Strider lockups. But it's good because that you can see how that on this side here, it kind of drops back down. It's good because it's safe. Bad because it can move. So you can hear it. So there's some lock rock. So here's my old collaboration knife between Strider and Bob Trzula, and it's CPM 154. Not the greatest steel. Comparable here now we have D2. Neither anything I would say exceptional, and kind of have a similar premise. They're both Wharncliffes. Size differ by like maybe half an inch. So both larger folders. So if we look at tip strength, so the Strider's on the right and the Bastinelli's on the left. So you can see because of the way the Strider was ground, hollow grind to kind of compensate for not the full flat, but then you have more thickness throughout the body. Add a little swedge, you end up with a sort of quite stocky tip. I mean, it's actually, the thickness maintains for quite a long time before it gets to there, starts to taper into that final thin point. In comparison here, it's just a simple, straightforward drop grind that just kind of, again, just gets thin very quickly. As a fighting knife, a traditional fighting knife, I prefer this sort of straight stick style. A lot of people do. When you fight with a knife, you kind of want, you're the one controlling it. You're the one creating the hand grips, controlling what the blade is doing. Those people who want to hold a knife and defend themselves this way, or possibly this way. Both ways I don't think are optimal, and discussing that can be for another video. I may even have the discussing that subject, but it's fine. It's still going to lock in, but the issue here is, I said, the design is overpowering it so much because now it's the low slung blade. And why that matters for me at least is in terms of feel. When it's like a stick, it rotates in my hand. Very quickly I can turn my wrist and the person doesn't know if I'm going to slash this way or this way. They can't tell if I'm going to stab. It's sort of floating in a sort of center point. I talk about center line, Wing Chun, and how it sort of, a lot of people say it connects to Kali and other things. I mean, if China originally was this large continent, people migrated and stuff, they considered most of it all Asian in any way. Yeah, the center line theory, it's like saying this knife is facing you and you're looking at it. Because it's straight, where is it going? It's hard to tell. It's still fluid. As a person holds it, the way you perceive it, it's very quick to change direction. If it's up here, it can come down. It's still versatile. It's sort of the way it presents itself to the opponent. That means, for example, let's say, well here, with this knife, it's pointed down. It's always pointed down. So if someone wants to stab, they have to kind of scoop up. If they want to come down, they have to go very high up and come down. Like you can see, it doesn't turn easily. You can see when I turn my wrist, the blade isn't presenting itself towards the opponent, it's presenting itself that way. So I actually have to, if let's say this was a dot and I was targeting the enemy, I actually have to shift my hand a little bit. If say I want to intimidate them by making that slash, I have to move over here. Can you kind of get what I'm saying? If this was the middle, this is what the attention is, this is where I want to intimidate and attack, that's what I have to do. And to not give the impression that I'm going to slash downward, I have to, because the blade is always so far low slung, again I have to kind of tilt it up. And what adds to that even more is that it's low slung but not negative angle. When you hold this knife, actually, if you see in my hand, it's very upright. Though it has this sort of dropped down blade area, it's not a negative angle. The blade itself is not like this. Meaning if I hold it, it's not like that. So if I cut at the opponent, I'm getting more reach out there where my opponent is. It's still a very upright knife. So when slashing, I still have to pronate my wrist I still have to like do this motion to get the tip to where I want to cut, or just wait and make larger motions to get that tip to cut this point. You know, I've discussed this in my tactical video on the best tactical knife, but say this was the part I want to cut, it was a leg or something. I have to do that, look where my hand is. So that's how far my arm and hand had to move. On the flip side, if there was the same point, now my hand has to go there. And that matters because that's added motion, that's extra time, and that matters a lot, especially in a knife fight. The difference between having to do motions like, you know, if this was like this, the difference of having to make little cuts like that and keep my hand, look how close it is to my body, or not moving around as much, and I can get effective cuts, compared to now having to do these motions. It is far different. I think it's good for power cuts. You know, if you want to do a large motion and really hack at something, you know, again, that's why I say it kind of reminds of a kitchen knife. That's what it reminds of, chopping. That being said, would I have any hesitation using this knife to defend myself? There's a little bit of a cutout, so it's possible that you can accidentally engage it. So I can do that. So that's a little bad. I don't like that. It seems like these European knives or the Fred Perrin, they just like to put that cutout that's deeper on this side and less on more, you know, so basically this lock bar sticks out so you can do that. I'm like, yeah, so it's easy for people to unlock their knife, but again, that logic is it's easier for you to unlock your knife. So I don't think that belongs in a fighting knife per se, or any type of hard use knife. So for me, the final role that I would place this knife is, it's still just a utility blade, a light to medium use knife. I say that because, again, the lock construction, the hardware, that prevents it from being hard use. I was reviewing this and eating at a restaurant, taking a break, and I had the knife out, and I asked some people, and their impression wasn't a fear. For example, I remember the very first time I saw this knife, it invoked some fear. I was like, what the heck is this? And it was intimidating, the size of it, all of it in general. I was used to seeing knives around the size of a Sage 2, paramilitary 2s also. The military, Sparkle military was too much. It was like a crazy size knife. It was too ridiculous. And a lot of people, I think you're in that boat too. For the 4-inch blade size is sort of not normal for you. It's not what you're comfortable with. As a person who's been around knives for a while, and I think this will happen for you guys too, is that you start to see a lot of knives. You handle them all the time. Blade shapes such as Warncliffe's, I think, start to look more for utility, not for any sort of aggression. If you could imagine this knife without some of the jimping, without some of these little tactical features, it would look like a very clean, organic knife. Like something you would see a Gavco make or Anzo make, which I like. I like that type of knife is good because it fits its role, it does its role well. Thin, full flat grind. You know, that's the same logic that you see on those kind of knives. But not on tactical knives or large folders. You know, a large knife, you know, you still got to have that extra level of performance. At this large size of a knife, does it do the equivalent in terms of monetary value and also capabilities of a knife this size?